Within the latest Black Panther film, Wakanda Forever, it tells a story about black people and brown people that shares a common enemy, which were their white colonizers. But rather than logically unify themselves against their shared enemies, they instead fought against themselves. The logical decision to unify themselves against their white oppressors was never explored, nor even mentioned once within the 2-hour movie. If you think that the exclusion of that logical narrative was an oversight, you are extremely naive. It was done by deliberate design. Black audiences are being deliberately socially engineered through movies to think and behave in ways that serves and protects the interests of the white society. Social engineering through movies is not a conspiracy theory. Since images and information directly influence our thoughts, then through movies, they're able to instill thoughts into our subconscious minds while we think we're just being entertained. White social scientists found that doing so is necessary to prevent black resentment from rising up against the white society, given its long and brutal history of oppressing black people. This was also the case within the Marvel's first Black Panther movie. It is intentionally filled with propaganda that serves the interests of the white society. In the film, the black revolutionary that's trying to liberate his people is portrayed as the villain. They even had the Killmonger. They even had the character Killmonger viciously murdered a black woman to further turn the black audiences against him and his ideology. Furthermore, the white CIA agent that shoots down an aircraft, killing black pilots while trying to deliver weapons to aid in the black liberation movement. In this scene, he is portrayed as heroic. When the white CIA agent shot down the aircraft attempting to deliver weapons to the black masses throughout the world, many black audiences cheered for him, not realizing that they were cheering against their own self-interest as black people. Both Black Panther films were seen around the world by millions of black people, and both grossed over $1 billion worldwide. And it was expected to do so. To believe that the white establishment would finance a film that would be seen globally by millions of black people and not insert their white self-serving propaganda into the film is extremely naive. Movies and TV shows are tools used by the white ruling class to keep black people thinking and behaving in ways that serves and protects the interests of the white society. From the perspective of the white establishment, to not have done so would have been foolishly irresponsible, given the white society's long history of brutally exploiting black people. You know, most people naively believe that movies are made for nothing more than entertainment, but that never was the case. The greatest social messages are promoted through movies. Social norms promoted through films can influence the way of thinking and the cognitive map of the populated audience. In a normal conversation, when you're using logic and facts, your guard is naturally up. But when you're watching a movie, there's no debate. Your guard is therefore down. The sensitive part of your brain is not in action. It's not saying, yes, I agree with this or I disagree with that, like you would within a conversation or debate. When you're watching movies, you're actually in an alpha state, being completely downloaded with ideas and images. The definition of values by which people operate are greatly influenced by the movies and media images that are fed into their minds. Social norms promoted through the media and movies can influence the way of thinking and the cognitive map of a populated audiences. Because perceptions created by the media leads to non-deliberate, thoughtful decisions making or decisions making below the level of consciousness. It has been called thinking without actually thinking, and it ultimately leads to the unconscious similar behaviors. People are like computers. All you have to do is keep feeding them certain propaganda repeatedly, and you can steer an entire generation towards an applied objective. Through this movie subliminal programming system, millions of black audiences are being manipulated to think in ways that serves and protects the system of white supremacy. It's how the white society protects itself from massive unified black retribution. This movie subliminal programming system provides the white establishment with a more covert method for manipulating the collective minds of the black masses. The white establishment also uses the movie industry to reshape the image of our heroes in ways that serve their system of white supremacy. This was recently witnessed within the Bob Marley biopic entitled One Love. During the life of Bob Marley, he wrote and sang many songs about standing up against the tyranny of white oppression. However, within the Bob Marley biopic, that revolutionary aspect of the man has been removed, and his ideology of love and peace is amplified, thus making him appear as a one-dimensional man advocating only love and peace to the benefit of the white society. And the film only focuses on his conflict with other black people, thus subliminally conveying the message, once again, that it's we that are now our worst enemies. That constant subliminal programming keeps black collective aggression shifted away from the white society and redirected against ourselves. The same was also done to Dr. King. Within all biopics about Dr. King, only certain speeches are selected. Only certain speeches are allowed to be put on film. Within all movies about Dr. King, his speeches condemning the white society are excluded, while only those advocating peace are presented, thus making him also appear as a one-dimensional man advocating only peace and love for the benefit of the system of white supremacy. Even if you go back and watch the Malcolm X movie, which starred Denzel Washington, if you compare the speeches used in the film to Malcolm X's countless other speeches, you'll notice that the speeches used in the film are the least potent and have been watered down to ensure that black moviegoers don't leave the theater feeling of resentment toward the white establishment. Within movies depicting black historical figures, white producers also often insist that fictionalized white characters be added to the script. Here are some examples of this practice. Actor-director Danny Glover was seeking funding to make a movie about the Haitian Revolution. However, white producers refused to fund the film because it lacked white heroes. They said that they really liked the project, but would only fund it if Danny Glover added fictionalized white heroes. The white movies makers are always trying to control the telling of our history to make themselves appear less inhumane throughout history. Mr. Glover declined and the project was denied funding. This practice was also done to Don Cheadle, the Oscar-nominated actor who produced and co-wrote and starred in a movie called Miles Ahead about Miles Davis. The white producers refused to fund the movie until Don Cheadle created a fictional white character to act as a friend and mentor to Miles Davis. It wasn't until he wrote the part of the fictional white character and cast the white actor, Ewan McGregor, in the role that he got the green lit to do the project. Another example of this trend was clearly seen in the movie Cry Freedom, starring Denzel Washington as the slain South African anti-apartheid activist Stephen Biko, the great Stephen Biko. Now, if you've seen this movie, you are aware of the fact that the movie was in fact less about Stephen Biko and made more about the white newspaper editor that befriended him. In fact, the main hero of the movie was the white newspaper editor. Even Denzel Washington himself expressed being both surprised and disappointed of how the movie was edited to be more about the white newspaper editor than it was about Stephen Biko. A rebuttal commonly used by the white producers is that their decisions to add white characters or focus the story around whites are financial decisions to make the film more desirable to a larger audience. But that's merely an excuse because the white roles that they often insist be written into the script are often filled by white actors that doesn't have very strong box office draw power. They're often less famous than the black leads in the film. The reason these roles are created is to primarily whitewash history and to put forward their message that exemplifies and exonerates their racial group. Through this movie programming system, millions of black audiences have been socially engineered to revere Caucasians in spite of a brutally horrific history of the contrary. This was also done through those movies and TV shows constantly depicting Caucasians as being white saviors of black people. We also saw this in the movie The Hidden Figures. The white director Theodore Melfi, the fan added fictional white saviors characters to the movie by saying that there needed to be white people who do the right thing, regardless of the fact that there weren't they didn't do so in that real story. This ideology is held by most white filmmakers and white historians. Whenever whites are in control of telling our stories in film and in history books, they always whitewash facts to make their racial group appear lesser immoral and more humane throughout history than they truly, in fact, were. And in doing so, they've given their racial group a favorable image makeover within the collective minds of black people. It's a true reason why so many black people now enamours whites in spite of a brutally horrific history of the contrary. The programming of people through movies is not a silly conspiracy theory. The US government has also been directly funding big budget Hollywood movies to the public or to shape public opinions for decades. The Pentagon has had a hand in sponsoring Hollywood films going all the way back to the start of filmmaking in the 1920s. We have to stop believing that our minds are being shaped by silly slave syndrome myth and recognize that the white society exploits its monopoly over the information fed into our minds to manipulate us to think in ways that serve the white society. There are 4 ways to brainwash a people: by what they're taught, by what they see, by what they hear, and through repetition. Because the white society controls the education we're taught, the media images we see, the societal narratives that we hear, and through repetition, they're able to brainwash us through thinking ways that serves and protects the interests of the white society. It is the true reason why many black people now perceive ourselves as being our own worst enemies and reveres Caucasians in spite of a brutal history to the contrary. We must function based on what is true in order to liberate ourselves. Because if our understandings of our mental state remains flawed, then all of our liberating strategies that stems from those misunderstandings will also be flawed. This is why those of us who know the truth must teach African proverb. It's time to wake up to our reality. The more you study, the more you realize that our plight has nothing to do with a silly slave syndrome myth. One love and peace.